Hey guys, benpaines here, and today we're back once again for another video, and this time we are back down at Teamsport Bristol to try out the brand new karts they've just had installed onto the track. I was really excited for this one and I can't wait to show you guys the footage. Now, before we get into the formalities of the format for this event, if you are new to the channel or if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, as I really do appreciate it. And if you enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like on it as well, as it really does help me out. Now, as we get into this small little qualifying run, which was actually a Superpole, so everyone was out on track at once and there was only one lap to put in our very best lap time that we possibly could. Obviously, no one's used the karts in these conditions, no one's used these karts at all, apart from I think one or two public sessions before on this day. But I was just determined to get my head down, try and use what we knew in the track and really make the most of it. Now, following on from this Superpole, we then had a 15-minute sprint race which decided our position for the 45-minute endurance race at the end of the evening, where we had to complete one pit stop in the middle of it. So we're coming around here on the last couple of corners. You can see we have Jacob Eckrew up ahead of us. We did have a lot of Cardiff members come over for this one, and we're going to come across the line down the start finish straight with a 39.652, which did in fact put me in pole position for the start of the heat race, which I was really excited for. And without further ado, we're going to jump straight into that one now. As mentioned, no fancy edits with this one. We're jumping straight into the start of the first heat. Obviously, it's only 15 minutes long. I've tried to condense this heat down a little bit, as not too much really happened, if I'm honest, so I tried to highlight some of the better bits. But we started in first position here and get underway quite well, trying to stay as tight to the apex as we can, just to try and preserve our position coming into the first lap. Obviously, I haven't really included this lap time, as we were sort of trundling around at the beginning with the yellow flag. So we get underway quite well, and you can see that there's a massive drivers behind us. It was a completely stacked out event. I believe that there was 18 of us on track at the time, all trying out the new kart, so I wanted to try and pull away if I could and try and preserve the position that I magically found myself in. Obviously, I hadn't had too much pace at the moment down at Bristol, and I also haven't really been going down too regularly at the moment. So I think that doing BRKC a couple of weeks ago really helped me for the Superpole Qualifying there, as I was just able to get on the pace as quickly as I could, and this allowed me to just sort of put it on pole and then try to escape. However, this obviously wasn't going to go smooth sailing, because we all know what I'm like, making a few mistakes and not quite being fully up to the pace as some of the other guys behind me. Then began to understand the lines I was taking and were then able to catch up in the braking zones, etc. So we come across the line on our first lap, a 39.868, which is actually slower than our qualifying time, so I knew that I had a little bit of time to find if I was going to try and break away from Harrison Gravner, who had made his way past Rob Johnson up into second. So I had to try and get my head down. You can see me looking over my shoulder quite a few times just to make sure that I'd sort of preserve the gap. Obviously, where Harrison had made an overtake on Rob, this gave us a little bit of a gap, a couple of kart lengths, but you can see already I am beginning to go quite defensive yet again. So obviously you can't quite see it in the camera, and this is sort of the nature of being in first place in some of these videos, and I haven't really invested in a better camera yet to see it, but it's really difficult to see behind. However, we do come across the line with a lap that was in fact faster than our qualifying lap, with a 39.460. so I felt that the karts were beginning to warm up. I felt a little bit more comfortable as I was going around on more and more of these laps, and this obviously led to faster times coming in. Now, compared to how Bristol has been recently when I've been down, it's felt a lot slippier in the old karts, and there just felt like there was a lot more grip, especially on the bottom section. And this will become apparent later on in the video when we get into the endurance race. I begin to gain a bit more confidence yet again, but you can see the minimal amounts of brake pressure that I'm putting on the pedal as I'm coming through the last corner, and again coming around the first corner I'm barely even lifting off the throttle, and again the tiniest little taps on the brake is all that's really needed at the moment in order to get the karts to slow down. It felt so responsive. But in the meantime, we do have Harrison going for a huge dive bomb up the inside of us into the bottom hairpin, and luckily I was able to get the drive out of the corner to perform a nice switchback on him to maintain my position in first place, before then sitting in the middle of the track just to try and defend that position a little bit better, compared to just leaving the door open as I did. So We do skip forward in this one, as honestly, as I mentioned, not too much happened, but you can see that the lap times are coming down, and in fact you are watching the fastest lap from the first heat that I did. So you can see we're currently on a 38.997, so our times have come down significantly compared to the beginning of the session. And now what you are watching is my fastest lap of the first heat. So we're trying to use as wide a line as possible to maintain our speed going through the top sections of the track. Again, really not pressing on the brake pedals too hard, because I feel like if you hit the brakes like you normally would down here at Bristol, then it would easily lock the brakes. So you really had to be careful on the brakes in these karts, and again just trying to gain as much momentum out of the last corner as possible to come across the line with a 38.870, which is not the quickest time down at Bristol. It's a whole 2 seconds slower than my fastest lap ever at Bristol, but we were still on for some decent pace. Now we do round out the first heat here. You can see we're still in first position, just been trundling around at the front. Our time's been a little bit slower, and that was due to a few yellow flags coming out just because of a bit of water spillage that you can see on the left hand side there, and it kept leaking onto the track, causing us to lose momentum, and I couldn't quite find my rhythm as much as I would later in the second race that we did. Obviously it's a bit longer as well. So we've come around here on the last couple of laps of the race, and we're still in first place, driving a lot more defensively at this point, as we did have Harrison right up behind us, and you can see we're also managing to catch up with some of the other drivers that are near the back end of the pack. So we're coming around here and coming across the line with a 39.106, which isn't the fastest lap, but it did conclude the very first race. So with this in mind, we were going to qualify in second, as someone was picked at random to qualify in first position and also a lap ahead. So if you get a little bit confused going into the second race in terms of the position counter and sort of where we are, then that is why. So here you can see straight away the person selected at random was in fact Thomas Wiltshire over from Cardiff, a member of the Razio drag team. So we're just going to try and get past him as quickly as possible in this second race and try and break away, hoping that he will hold up some of the other drivers behind. Now obviously it was going to be a very tall order to try and get a whole lap ahead of Tom, who was up ahead of us, unless we got really lucky and got off to an incredible start. Now the lights are just about to go green as we get underway right at the bottom of the hairpin, and we do get off to a pretty poor start, if I am honest. So we do end up losing a couple of kart lengths to Tom, who managed to get up the ramp pretty quickly, and again I knew that I was going to have to take a few defensive lines at the beginning of the race just to try and fend off some of the other drivers behind us. Obviously Harrison finishing behind us in the first heat then meant that he was up behind us in third place as well. Now you can see Tom is going a little bit wayward here, and I was hoping to capitalise on this as we got a few laps into the race. Obviously I knew I was going to close up behind him, as I did have quicker overall pace, but it was just going to be a matter of when I was going to be able to take the opportunity and hopefully not get compromised on the drivers behind that were getting impatient as well. So we're coming up the ramp here, trying to stay a little bit tighter here just to ensure that the drivers behind can sort of get past us going up the ramp. And again, I'm just trying to follow the same sort of lines that Tom is taking, just to ensure that we're on the same sort of pace, whilst also hitting the pedals a little bit softer through the braking areas, just to try and close up in the braking zone. But he's doing a very good job currently at the moment, managing to hold us off in first place as we come across the line with a 39.777, which isn't the best pace once again. So he got off to a pretty slow start in this one compared to when we were in the 38-second lap times at the end of the last session. You can see here he goes quite wide into the bottom hairpin, and we're able to get a good run, however, and this leads to us just funneling our way up the inside as we go up the ramp. Now we don't actually manage to make our way up into first place. As I mentioned, we are still a lap down, so despite being able to make the overtake stick, we are still in second place. So at this point it was a matter of just hot lapping as hard as I possibly could to try and get away from the drivers behind that were hopefully still behind Tom. Now I think Harrison was able to squeeze his way past as well as we got up the ramp, so I knew there was going to be a bit of pressure on my tail. And we also had other drivers like Chris Ball behind us as well, who's obviously a very, very competent driver. So here, once again, just trying to get as clean exits as we can, trying to get into a bit of a groove. So for this part of the video, I'm just going to sort of show you a few hot laps of me just trying to lay down some decent lines and get on the pace as quickly as possible. So We're coming down the bottom ramp here. You can see again, I'm just lifting off, hitting the brakes a little bit too hard there, which is obviously losing quite a bit of our momentum coming out of the last corner. But we do come across the line on this lap with a 39.372. So our lap times are coming down increasingly as we continue throughout this event. So again, trying to swing the car to the left before throwing it back to the right to try and get a good run as we can. Coming into the bottom hairpin, getting as tight as possible, getting the rotation done before the corner so we can get on the power as early as possible coming up the ramp. And again, through the top section, staying to the right and not using the brake at all, but instead just using the steering wheel to slow the kart down, much like you do at the bottom ramp of Cardiff, and much like I also mentioned in my previous video at Basildon, which I will link at the top of the screen if you want to watch that one as well. But in the meantime, we do come across the line even quicker, once again a 39.347. So I knew that the lap times were going to continue to tumble as we pushed on throughout this event. Again, trying to take a nice wide line, getting the kart rotated before we get up the ramp. Obviously, we want to try and maintain as much sort of speed as possible going up the ramp, especially when there is lighter drivers behind us, because I always find that we do get put under pressure. And whilst I say that, Harrison sent a very good move up our inside into the two hairpins at the top of the track, and I didn't really want to fight this too much, so I slotted back in behind him as I knew that he did have slightly more pace than me on the evening. So I wanted to try and stick in behind him if I could and try and break away from some of the other drivers behind. Obviously, as I mentioned, we did have Chris Ball behind us, and also Seb Miller was fighting through the pack as well in third and fourth. So I wanted to try and break away, or I'm sorry, not third and fourth, because I'm in third, fourth and fifth. So I wanted to try and break away. Obviously, you can see that we have lost a few tenths compared to our fastest lap so far, but I was determined to get my head back down, follow some of the lines that Harrison was taking, and try to reel him back in. Obviously, I didn't want him just breaking away into the distance, because this would have pretty much wrapped the event up, and we probably would have lost out on a podium if we would have had to defend from the two BSR drivers that were behind us as well. So despite this, we come across the line with our fastest lap so far once again, only 2 tenths off our best in the first heat of 39.071, and we are just increasingly getting more and more confident with the car as we use it more and more, and we're also beginning to obviously lower our lap time. So you can see me checking over my shoulder there. Chris is now right up behind us as well, so I was hoping that we could just keep our heads down, keep up with Harrison, and try and break away into the distance. Again, just trying to take as tight lines as possible through the top two hairpins, and again just trying to almost miss the first apex to try and wrap around into the second apex on the last corner to get as good a run as we can, and that has worked in our favour very well. We come across the line with our fastest lap of the evening yet, a 38.786, so I knew that we had some decent pace now at this point, and I was hoping to just channel this and try and go quicker and quicker. You can see from our last lap and also through the first section of this lap, we're really starting to get into the groove now. We've pretty much half the distance that Harrison had ahead of us here, so we're just trying to carry this momentum through, trying to take a wider line than him and getting on the power a little bit earlier, and this is once again allowing me to close in a little bit as we come into the latter stages of this lap. Again, on this occasion, decided to take a bit of a tighter line going into the last corner, and this leads us to come across the line with our fastest lap yet, once again a 38.678, sorry, not 687. So we're really on the pace now, and we're right up behind Harrison, who is up ahead of us. But as we come into the bottom hairpin, Chris Ball sends a cheeky move down the inside there, nudges us offline a little bit, and it's just enough to let him squeeze past up into the last podium position. So now I am down in fourth place, and instead of fighting once again, as I've mentioned earlier, I wanted to try and keep up with him, try and work together, and try and just put some laps in. So we do skip ahead here in this one. Our fastest lap so far, once again, at 38.399, and this is obviously due to just sitting in the train. Chris makes a little bit of a mistake here coming into the first few corners. I decided to try and go for a little bit of a switchback, but instead I just opened the door a little bit too much, allowing Seb Miller to slot his way up the inside once again, and instead of slotting in behind him, much like I had done before, I didn't really want to lose this position, so I decided to try and send it back into the top hairpin. A nice move up at the inside, but I just left the door open a little bit too wide there. This allows Seb the position back, and it also allows Jacob behind him to sort of squeeze his way through, and now instead of being in second place, we've tumbled all the way down the order in about 10 laps to 6th position, which is obviously not the place that we want to be in. Obviously we want to be quite high up in this one, especially starting on pole and finishing first in the first heat. So you can see a little bit of a shake of the head there, as I was a little bit disappointed, and that is where we stayed for the next few laps. So I decided to sort of tuck into the pits. I thought I had a little bit more pace than the guys up ahead of me, and we come out of the pits here in 9th position, which quickly drops to 10th, almost a near collision there, and obviously due to that momentum loss we then drop all the way down to 12th as well. So you can see from our last lap of 49.584 that we have actually lost about 11 seconds in the pit stops compared to what should probably be about 8 to 10 seconds. So we have lost quite a bit of time here, and now we are stuck up behind some of the other guys up ahead of us. So Kai Pugh here from Cardiff once again manages to go up the inside of one of the other drivers, so I decided to follow him through here, and we make our way up into 11th. And I knew at this point that we were going to have a bit of an uphill struggle going into the remaining parts of the race, obviously having to traverse some of the back markers up ahead of us, who are obviously not back markers because they haven't pitted yet, and also we're going to have to really put in some clean laps if we want to try and keep pace with the guys who are up ahead in clean air, but also if we want to try and jump them, we're going to have to really find our way through as quickly as possible. So coming into the bottom hairpin here once again, trying to get our foot down as quickly as possible, trying to look for the inside as early as we can on Kai up ahead of us, and we managed to make our way up one more position up into 10th once again. Obviously we are quite far down the order, but quite a few of the drivers up ahead of us are yet to pit, apart from Aaron, who you can see on the left hand side there in the pit lane. So we managed to get past him, and we are now up into 9th position. We're on some decent pace once again, but we are beginning to get held up by the driver up ahead of us, who's completely wayward going into each of the corners. So I tried to get a nice switch back here going into the bottom hairpin, sliding up the inside quite nicely. No contact made up into 8th position, where I thought the position was made. However, the driver is trying to make his way around the outside, so we drop back down to 9th, but luckily, as we do have the inside line, we're able to solidify that 8th position there in this race. So we are coming round now. Obviously our last lap was at 38.756. This lap's going to be slightly slower, obviously due to battling with some of the drivers up behind, but now it was a case of just putting in the best laps that we could to try and just move our way further up the grid, really. So again, you can see the driver from earlier sort of sliding around in front of us. We were now a lap ahead of them at this point, so you can also see ahead of us we have skipped forward about 30 laps, because honestly it was just me hot lapping for a long time. So you can see our fastest lap so far of 38.011 and our last lap of 38.987, but we were right on the back of brothers James and Thomas Wiltshire. At this point I really wanted to try and solidify some positions if I could, so sending a bit of a rough dive bomb on James there to make our way up into 7th position, and later again you can see that we are now up the back of Thomas once again, who is obviously a position ahead of us because he is ahead of us a whole lap. So it was a case here of could we make it past in this one as quickly as possible, because up ahead were sort of the top sort of 2nd to 5th were all fighting up ahead of us, so I wanted to try and get past him as quickly as I could. You can see in terms of lap times we are beginning to be held up, so I knew that if I was going to make a move I'd have to make it quite quickly. So here we just make a big lunge down the inside, manage to pull it off, and we don't actually gain a position, but we do gain some key sort of clean air on the track, and this is where we stayed then for the next few laps until we then began to catch up with the little train that was up ahead of us from 3rd to 6th. So I knew that if I wanted to really get involved in this in the last couple laps of the race, which I'm going to leave uncut for this part of the race, I knew that I would have to put in some pretty good lap times. You can see we're being very consistent at 38.032, and we also see Chris make another lunge up the inside for 5th position. So I knew that if I wanted to try and make a move now, Harrison was probably going to be quite defensive, obviously seeing I've caught up quite a lot, and Chris was also beginning to drive quite defensive as well. So we were down in 7th at this point, obviously starting in 1st, not really where you wanted to be. So instead here we're just going to try and take as tight lines as we can and hope for an opening to occur. So we come across the line there at 38.167, so we are beginning to get slowed down a little bit, and you can see the Constantina effect through the bottom sort of Mickey Mouse section here. And again, you can see Chris goes for another move up the inside of Jason, so he's managed to make 2 positions on 2 laps on the very same corner. You can see Harrison's looking over his shoulder as well. I was hoping to work with him to try and get past Jason, who was up in 5th, but instead everyone decided to drive quite defensively at this point. So I knew it was going to be very difficult to make a move unless someone made a very big mistake. So we're coming into the last couple of corners here, and once again, pretty much nose to tail with one another. I'm pretty much pushing Harrison up into the back of Jason here, and we come across the line at 38.733. So we're losing about half a second a lap here at this point, getting really bumped around there. We get bumped from behind, which is really disappointing, as I thought that we would have been able to follow Harrison through here as he makes a move up the inside of Jason. So I was quite annoyed about that, to get punted in the rear, but we do have the overspeed on Jason. We give him a little bit of a nudge to try and disrupt him and Harrison up ahead. I was hoping Jason was going to go for something here. He goes quite defensive, and Harrison makes a very rookie mistake here by just trying to go around the outside of Chris there. That then forces him to the outside line going into the last couple of corners, and this then allows me to sort of funnel my way through on the last corner up behind Jason. So now we're up into 6th position once again, and I was looking to try and make something else happen before the end of the race. Now we are coming into the very last lap of the race, and you can see here the gap sort of opens. I half looked for it but decided against it, as I didn't really want to gain a penalty at this point in the race. I believe that Jacob up ahead of us, who was currently in 3rd position, did actually have a penalty, so we were going to get promoted regardless. And I could see that Chris was pretty much parking the bus. You can see that actually causes me to bump into Jason, Harrison to bump into me, so it's all sorts of mannerisms being thrown out of the window, and we do unfortunately come across the line on the very last lap in 6th, which did then result in 5th position. So really enjoyed this event. Unfortunately, we did slip down the order quite early on, and it was just a bit of a shame. But honestly, the brand new karts down at Bristol are an absolute joy to drive. I enjoyed it so much. I will be heading down to Bristol once again for Grid Series V3, which will be coming very soon. However, this does in fact bring us to the end of the video, so if you guys have enjoyed this one, can you please leave a like on the video down below, as it really does help me out. And if you're new to the channel, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel, as I really do appreciate it. But in the meantime, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.